Amidst the colossal waves of the Emerald Sea, riding high on breakers the size of castle walls, the Endeavour, a huge galleon with vast white sails, is coming to the end of its long journey. For 6 months, the pride of the Dominion fleet has endured a perilous voyage filled with trials and tribulations, testing the will, fortitude, reflex, and strength of all who man her. Yet now, after a seemingly endless journey, its destination is in sight. Upon the horizon and through the haze of salt and sea breeze, a vast mass of land can be seen. Vaerillian, the fabled land that saw the elves take their first step on this plane. It is a realm steeped in mystery and forgotten threats, ripe with ancient secrets and valuable assets to exploit. Almost 100 years ago, the Dominion, inheritors to the fallen empire, founded a colony here. They built quickly and effectively across the eastern shore, raising high walls and battlements upon foundations left by a long-forgotten culture. Over decades, the city of Landfall flourished. Yet beyond its battlements lies an untempered wilderness, a breathtaking landscape of deep forests and towering mountains. While incredibly dangerous, this largely unexplored province presents boundless opportunities to adventurers, mercenaries, and the forces of the Dominion itself. Opportunities that you have journeyed in search of. Hello and welcome to Performance Check. My name is Rob and this is the first chapter of my campaign journal. Now, if you missed it, I made a prelude video to this which explained briefly the characters that will be involved in this campaign, the setting that this campaign will be exploring, and the tools that I will be using and have been using to run this game. We're 13 sessions in so far, so I've got a bit of a backlog of information to put across into video format, but I'm very much looking forward to telling this story to you. Now, that opening section is what I read to the players to introduce the first session. And it's one of the oldest tricks in the book, that I use at least, is to begin a campaign with the characters arriving in an unfamiliar setting. Because the players don't know very much about this world, it is helpful for the characters to know that much about that world. Therefore, they can ask questions, they can discover things anew when they come across them on the world map and in the session. So, the three characters, Karlas Ungolider, Ashbourne Briar, and Olden Remelstein, say that when you're drunk. It begins with the three of them being told to continue their work upon the vessel, work that they've been undergoing for 6 months. Everyone has had to pitch in on the great voyage from Main Realm to Vaerillian. Now, I explained to the players that this would be a massive undertaking. I used the example of the Mayflower travelling from Europe to America. Now, that took about 66 days, and apparently they lost 2/3 of their crew. Now, imagine doing that voyage for 6 months. Well, the Endeavour has also lost 2/3 of its crew. Only the most hardened travellers have survived the perilous journey here. I also used the Endeavour, this great vessel, as a kind of tutorial stage. As I mentioned before, Craig is a complete newcomer to Dungeons & Dragons, and I wanted to take this as an opportunity to introduce him to some of the mechanics. Without just taking him away and explaining all the rules, I wanted him to play the game. And so I said, Karlas, you are busy hoisting the mainsail or whatever it is you're doing upon this great ship, and I would like you to make a spot check, please. Explain, roll a d20, add the number next to spot. He does so and he succeeds. Karlas, out of the corner of your eye, you see one of your faithful travelling companions, Gent. He is looking away, unaware that a great spool of rope is tangling around his leg as a great weight has fallen away into the waves. Horrified, the crew look on as Gent is dragged towards the balustrade. Only you are close enough to do anything about it. What do you do? And Craig sits there and thinks for a moment and says, well, what can I do? And I say, well, you are a samurai. You are armed with one of the sharpest blades that could ever be forged within this world. And he takes the hint. And he says, I draw my samurai blade, my katana, and I bring it down upon the rope, cutting Gent from the great weight that is falling into the water. Well, Craig, I would like you to make an attack roll, please. And I explain how to do an attack roll. He is successful. Gent is prevented from being pulled into the water, and there is much rejoicing. Alden, the factotum, goes to make a witty remark, but then First Mate Maud gets up in his face and screams, "Hoist the mainsail," or whatever it is you're supposed to be doing on this ship. The three of them continue to work, but it isn't long before the travellers are summoned to the passenger quarters. I explained to them that on board the Endeavour all this time there has been a passenger of extreme importance, an agent of the Dominion, Emissary Darrell. Now, Emissary Darrell has been living a life of luxury in the passenger quarters. He has not contributed to the vessel getting to this destination at all. He has remained for the most part locked away in his quarters, and when he has emerged to the main deck, he has just watched other people toil and work hard and make small comments about how they might be a little more efficient with their time. He's not the most popular member on board the ship, and somehow has survived the journey without being awfully murdered or thrown overboard. "Yes, the three of you, come in, please take a seat," Emissary Darrell says, and he gestures for them to take a seat before a large oaken desk. "A drink?" He pours 3 goblets of wine and pushes them to the players. "I have a proposal that I would like to make to you. It seems that the three of you are cut from a different cloth from most of the crew members. No offence to them. I'm very grateful that they have all contributed in getting me here safely, but more importantly, getting this edict here safely." And he puts before him a vast scroll sealed with a metal band. "It is my sworn duty to ensure that this edict is delivered to Overseer Havelock at landfall. Now, unfortunately, our journey across the waves has been delayed significantly, and I had meant, or indeed I have been ordered, to stop off at Salt Garden, a small town upon the Isle of Erus, just off the mainland. Now, with this delay, it has meant that I am compelled to go to landfall first, and so I will be more than happy to pay the three of you 100 gold pieces up front to deliver this writ to the Elderman there. You may take one of the rowing boats from the side of the Endeavour. You are to row to the Isle of Erus with all haste. And I might add that if you are successful in this plight, and you feel it prudent, you may report to Knight Captain Dask at landfall once your duty is completed. He will provide you with a writ of service that will entitle you to further work contracted from the Dominion, if that is something that you are interested in. If not, I bid you all the best on your adventures. Do we have an accord?" And he raises a well-manicured hand to shake. Now, the players have a little aside when they say, well, we could easily just take the money and not even bother. But they decide that they want to be, at least for the most part, characters of their word. And so they shake Emissary Darrell's hand, and they agree to deliver this writ to the Elderman of Salt Garden. And so it was that the 3 characters wish their fellow crew members goodbye. They are climbing into the rowing boat when Ghent, the man who Carlas had saved, stops him and says, "Carlas, I have been carving this since our voyage first began. I would like you to take this as a sign of my gratitude." And he holds up a simple carving of the Endeavour itself, made from birch. Carlas takes it and says, "I shall treasure this always." And he puts it into his pack. And they climb into the rowing boat and set off towards the Isle of Erus. So once again, to reinforce the mechanics of the game, I ask for checks to see how efficiently the players are able to row this small boat over the colossal waves towards the Isle of Erus. I'm going to be honest, they don't do very well, so I describe how they row in circles for a moment before getting back on track and arriving at a cove with a small jetty. They are able to climb out of the boat along the jetty and fall upon the shore. And I describe to them how joyful it is, the feeling of adulation, the feeling solid ground beneath your feet for the first time in 6 months. There's always stories about people who have been on vessels for a long time. They have sea legs, they feel like they're still moving. Well, I tell them how they have to get over that, and that'll take a little while. But thankfully, they've arrived somewhere where they may secure a peaceful night's rest. They landed the rowing boat at a location known as the Sea Cauldron. They know this because they are able to look at the map that they've been given before they left the Endeavour. It is called Sea Cauldron because of the shape of the cove that a small settlement rests above. And after a while they're able to climb steps carved into rock to this small collection of buildings. There is a tavern there, and its sign swings in the sea breeze. Billow's Rest, it is called. And huddling against the breeze, they enter the tavern.
"All right, strangers, how's it going?"
says the barkeep. The barkeep is always played by the same individual in every game of D&D that I've ever run. It's sort of a Nurse Joy from Pokemon kind of deal.
"How's it going, strangers? Can I offer you some beds for the night? Can I offer you some drinks? Can I offer you some food? It's steaming hot."
Yes, please, we require all of those things. The players agree and they go to the table in the corner of the tavern and begin to sup quietly at ales, making plans for the next day. They're able to enjoy a quiet evening, but then, as the night gets darker, the wind begins to howl louder and rain lashes at the windows of the tavern. Suddenly, the doors of the tavern swing open, and a heavy-set individual with a large gut, flanked by two cronies, walks into the tavern and slams his hands upon the bar.
"I've been looking to sell these. Would you be interested, barkeep?"
says the dangerous-looking individual. He has a shaved head and one discoloured eye.
"Perhaps you'd like to ask my patrons, but to do so you'd have to buy a drink, Pletch, you know that. I don't like you hawking your wares whilst not getting anything from my establishment, or..."
The players are able to listen into this and see that this individual, Bletch, is trying to hawk his wares to the scant few patrons that rest in the Billow's Rest this evening. Bletch finally gets to the players' table and he says,
"Hello there, I've been looking to sell these on. Would you be interested?"
And he holds out a flabby hand, and in it there are 2 gleaming amethyst gems. The players look at them and decide that they aren't particularly interested in them. Alden makes a check and says they look a little bit blemished, a bit of discoloration here. Not the finest cut gems, and he offers him an insulting price. Bletch begins to square up to Alden.
"Are you telling me that these aren't the finest amethysts you've ever seen?"
Bletch clearly doesn't look particularly happy at them.
"You want to be careful, you know, insulting another man's wares."
And Alden looks him up and down and says, "You're lucky I didn't insult anything else about you, and trust me, there's plenty of highlights to pick from." And the 2 cronies behind Bletch sort of square their shoulders and he says,
No. This one ain't worth our time. We'll be seeing you."
And he gives him a look. The kind of look that says this is a local place for local people, and outsiders aren't welcome. After his dismissal, Bletch and his cronies disappear back out into the night. The barkeep says,
"You want to be careful of that one. He's got a dodgy reputation, and a very similar voice to my own."
The players go back to their drinks and they swap stories and memories of the many experiences they had and shared on board the Endeavour. Once again, the door of the tavern swings open with a violent blast of wind. Rain pours in from the outside and the windows shudder. A bedraggled individual stands there, silhouetted in the darkness of the threshold. Water pours from his mouth, his ears, and his eyes. Long, lank, wet hair covers one side of his face, and his eyes gleam with an amethyst hue.
"We're just about to close up for the night," the barkeep says. "I would advise you come back another..."
But before the barkeep can finish, this bedraggled, drowned-looking individual begins staggering towards the players. The other residents in the tavern begin to panic and scream as the windows of the Billow's Rest smash inwards, and more drowned-looking individuals with purple eyes begin crawling into the establishment and go to attack the players. And I say to them, for the first time in the campaign, roll initiative. The first one of these drowned individuals heads straight towards Carlas, reaching forward with wet, dead, clammy hands. They grapple for a moment, struggling in the dim light of the tavern. Carlas is able to push the horrible drowned man away, and he opens his mouth and a tirade of water comes splashing out towards him like a breath weapon almost. Carlos is asked to do a reflex saving throw. He is successful, gets a little bit of freezing water catch him on his shoulder, but he's able to draw his blade and cut this disgusting drowned individual down. Ashbourne the druid spots that there are other drowned men crawling towards them across the tavern floor. He holds his staff aloft, and suddenly great roots erupt from the floorboards as he casts Entangle, binding the creatures in place. Alden draws his rapier and spends a point of inspiration to inspire his first strike. He rolls behind one of these drowned individuals and brings the rapier across its throat, slaying it in one. This scene is absolute pandemonium. Bar stools go flying, more windows are shattered, and drowned men are brought low and destroyed. When the conflict is over, breathing hard, the players ask themselves, what are these things? They are able to ascertain that these men had indeed been drowned some time ago, yet some dark force puppeteers them to the billow's rest to attack. Why? They do not know. The barkeep is absolutely flabbergasted, but agrees to reward the players with free drinks and free accommodation for the night in his infinite gratitude. Has this happened before?
Well, there have been stories of drowned individuals coming back. Sailors pulled under the waves disappearing, then returning weeks later to their loved ones in the night.
What about that amethyst hue gleaming from their eyes? Ashbourne points out. Strangely the same colour as the gems that Bletch had offered us naught but a few hours ago. This is a troubling thought. They ask the barkeep if he knows anything about these gems.
I know about them. Why, it is a tradition for some here to be buried with those gems placed over their eyes. I fear that Bletch might have been grave robbing.
Well, if he's been grave robbing, Alden points out that maybe he's been doing something else with those who have died recently. They ask the barkeep how long it'll take for them to get from the Sea Cauldron. The barkeep explains they'll be able to make the journey along the Salt Road in about a day. So, the players agree to get some rest for their long journey ahead. The next day, the travellers embark on their journey across the Salt Road. It is a treacherous trail that leads above towering cliffs and along eroding shorelines. It's about halfway into their day's walk that I ask them to make a spot check. They are successful, and they see 3 figures hunched over what appear to be a great pile of rocks. They note that there are a number of these stones piled up on top of each other, erected over graves. These are Cairns, and whatever these 3 individuals are doing, well, it looks like they're up to no good. I don't need 3 guesses to tell who these 3 reprobates are, says Carlas, more to himself than to the other 2, and indeed he is right. Bletch and his 2 cronies, the Salt Brothers, are fecklessly digging into the Cairns. What do you think you're doing? They say, confronting Bletch. Have you no honour? Have you no respect to the fallen? And Bletch says, no, and they all charge at each other. Now this time, Carlas is first on the initiative list, which means he's able to use one of his abilities. As I mentioned in the prelude to this video, Carlas is a samurai class from the Oriental Adventures manual, and he has taken something which is pretty damn cool. It's called Ijatsu Focus. If Carlas is able to attack a flat-footed creature, an individual who hasn't acted in the initiative yet, he is able to do the traditional samurai quick draw. And he's able to do that against Bletch. Before Bletch has even pulled his weapon, Carlas is before him and BAM! Takes him down with a single strike. Effectively, he's able to do sneak attack damage against a foe who hasn't acted yet. Bletch falls to the ground dead, and the Salt Brothers panic and desperately try to fend off their attackers, but the players are upon them, and it isn't really much of a battle. They beat them fairly easily. They're bullies, after all, and all it took was to stand up to them, and they were defeated. And by defeated, I mean slaughtered, their remains thrown from the salt road into the sea. You don't think he had any connection with those drowned men attacking Sea Cauldron? They ask each other. Then Alden says, well, if he was, it doesn't matter anymore, does it? So I wasn't that surprised. As a DM, I'm fairly used to combats ending in death, but the players didn't really care about asking this individual questions. They just fucking killed them and shrugged and moved on. They saw he was grave robbing, didn't like it, put an end to it. They spend the rest of their day travelling, and as night falls they arrive at Salt Garden. This is a more substantial settlement than Sea Cauldron, where they just came from, but it is still modest. It is a fisherman's town. It is surrounded by a modest stockade with a few militia posted at the gates. Alden turns to the other two and he says, before we deliver this missive to the Ealdorman, should we not have a look inside? Should we see what the Dominion wants to ask this Ealdorman of this small town? And the other two look to each other and shrug and then agree, yeah, why not? So they break the seal on this writ and they have a look. And they discover that this is a directive to send 20 of the militia at Salt Garden to the capital, Landfall. The Dominion are asking for a draft, says Alden. They're asking for more men. I wonder if they have a shortage of forces there. They say the forests of Vaerillian are treacherous. And Ash says, well, that's not uncommon. Many different civilizations draft people from neighbouring settlements all the time. It's part of living in an empire. True. But it seems odd to ask for such a specific number from such a small town. They shrug. Alden attempts to remake the seal that, had kept the writ closed, and he doesn't do a particularly good job. They approach one of the militiamen and say, we're here to see the Ealdorman here. The militia gives them a look up and down as if to say, you don't belong here, you're an outsider. Then gives a curt nod and gives them instructions on where to go. There's sort of a roundhouse at the centre of this town, and they approach. They stand before the Ealdorman, who is taking counsel at this time, and they say, Ealdorman, we are here to deliver a writ from the Dominion. The Ealdorman gives them a withering look. You don't look like messengers, more like mercenaries. The players sort of look and say, well, we've been hired for a service, so in a way I suppose we are. Very well, I will take this missive. He takes it from them, goes to open it and sees that it sort of falls open. This seal has been broken. And they look at each other guiltily and have they don't even try and make any excuse. They just sort of shrug. Well, I do not deem the word of the Dominion to be sacred, but still. And he looks at it. I assume you know then that this is a draft for more men. It is not the first time that the Dominion has asked for this, and their request is not fair. Why is that, they ask. This is over half of the militia that are garrisoned here. Without them we'll be more vulnerable than ever before. We are plagued from attacks at night by formidable undead creatures that stalk from the waves and drag away our townspeople. If I am to send more men to landfall, then who will defend our people here? Who will stop them from being dragged away by this undead nemesis? Well, listen, says Alden, we are only the messengers, but perhaps we can come to some sort of accord. Like you say, we appear to be as mercenaries. We will be happy to fulfill that role. Perhaps we can find out what's going on with this undead threat, and bring an end to it. Then perhaps you'll be able to send your men to landfall. We would, of course, require payment for this service, and our services do not come cheap. We may be a small settlement, but I am loath to employ mercenaries to defend my people. Well, who else is going to? Says Alden, pressing the matter. The Dominion. They're asking to drag more of your men away. If we are successful, you will be able to uphold your oath to the Dominion and protect your people. I asked for a diplomacy roll, and Alden is more than successful. Very well, says the Ealdorman. Perhaps there is merit to your plan. I shall employ your services to dispatch this undead threat, but you shall only receive the funds once I have confirmed that they have been destroyed. How much are your services? Alden looks to the other two and then says, 1,000 gold pieces. The Alderman does a double take. 1,000? You would beggar us. Well, they say, you get what you pay for. And I'm struggling to hold back a laugh here. 1,000 gold pieces from an incredibly poor fishing town. They probably have that amount, but not by much more. So I ask for a diplomacy check. Alden does it again. But this time he adds his inspiration. And this is why the Factotum is an incredibly versatile class. They can spend these scant points of inspiration for moments of brilliance. And somehow, Alden is able to convince this Elderman to part with 1,000 gold pieces to stop this threat. But don't worry. The ramifications of this is huge. You'll see later on. I am in an impossible situation, says the Alderman, but I agree to your terms. You would speak with Rooker. He is a wayfarer, a sea ranger. He knows of the caves from which these fell beings stalk from. He will be able to guide you there. It's a small town, so it doesn't take the players long to find this Rooker. He is busy pulling out a great net filled with fish and pressing it upon a jetty at the docks of this town. Are you Rooker? Says Carlas. Aye, Rooker says. We would very much appreciate your help. We have been employed by the Alderman of the town to find a cave that has lots of awful undead drowned men in it. Aye. Is that all you can say? Aye, I know the cave that ye be yapping about, boy. I know the cave be a dangerous place indeed. I seen with my own eyes the undead blight crawling from it. Okay, well, we'll be happy to pay you to take us there, if that's all right. They all agree. Aye, nowt problem. But be warned, though. 'Tis a treacherous place. There used to be a lighthouse there once, and then it sank deep into the cliffs themselves. Yes, all right, well, we're just going to have to risk it, aren't we? And so they give Rooker some gold, and the three of them board the sloop, a small vessel that Rooker will sail around the Isle of Erus to get to these caves. Alden looks at the other two and says, I cannot believe that we are embarking on another voyage so soon. Little do they know that they are taking the first steps on a journey of a lifetime. So, that's the end of Chapter 1 of the Campaign Journal. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Next time we're going to see what happens when the Outlanders face their first major test and confront the dangers emerging from the deep window. Thanks for watching, and I hope that all of your performances are up to standard.